Okay, so picture this. You've just closed on your dream house. Years of scrimping and saving,
Oh, yeah.
right? It's finally happened, and you're so excited to start making memories in this amazing place. You can just imagine the smell of fresh paint, the
Mhm.
excitement of unpacking boxes, the sound of kids running around.
Mm.
And then one day you're sorting through the mail, and you find an envelope.
Ugh.
It's not addressed to you by name, but to the new owner.
Oh, no.
And inside is a letter that sends shivers down your spine, a letter from someone calling themselves the Watcher.
That's a that's a pretty good summary of what the Broaddus family went through back in 2014 when they bought 657 Boulevard.
Wow.
Yeah, a gorgeous six-bedroom house in Westfield, New Jersey. Westfield seems like a picturesque little town.
Yeah.
It should have been a happy homecoming for Maria Broaddus. She grew up in the neighborhood, but things took a dark turn pretty quickly and their lives were turned upside down.
It's like a nightmare. You think you're moving into your dream home and it becomes a nightmare. Welcome to CrimePod Castle's Twisted Crime series. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe.
So the first letter arrived just 3 days after they closed on the house, and right off the bat, it was clear that this wasn't your average piece of mail. The writer claimed that his family had been watching the house for generations, going all the way back to his grandfather in the 1920s.
Wow.
And his father, in the 1960s, he talked about having a duty to watch over the house and seemed to know a lot about the history of the property.
It's like something out of a creepy book,
Right.
right? Like a family legacy tied to the house, but in a really sinister way.
Yeah.
It just sets this unsettling tone like something is really, really wrong.
Right from the start, you get this feeling that something's not right, and the letters just got weirder from there.
Oh, no.
They went from these vague references to the house and its past to really personal comments about the Broaddus family themselves. The Watcher started mentioning the children by their nicknames, commenting on their birth order, even describing things he'd seen them doing inside the house. Imagine realizing that you and your family are being watched, analyzed by someone hiding in the shadows.
I can't even imagine. It's one thing to know your neighbors. Maybe you see them in their yard or wave as they drive by.
Yeah.
But to have someone watching your kids, knowing their routines, using their nicknames, that's crossing a line.
It is. It goes from unsettling to seriously scary. And remember, this was happening in a quiet, wealthy suburb,
Right.
a place where people usually feel safe and secure. The Broadduses were living what many would consider the American dream, and suddenly this dream was being poisoned by this unknown figure.
And it wasn't just that they were being watched, right? The language
Yeah.
in the letters was creepy and threatening.
Yeah, the language is where things get really disturbing. The Watcher talked about young blood
Oh, my God.
and asked if the children would be playing in the basement where no one could hear them scream. It's like he was taunting them, enjoying their fear.
I can't even imagine the sleepless nights, the constant looking over your shoulder, the fear of letting your kids out of your sight. It must feel like their whole world had been flipped upside down.
Definitely. And it wasn't just fear for their children's safety. The letters had these veiled threats and implied that something awful would happen if the Broadduses didn't do what the Watcher wanted.
What?
He seemed to believe that the house itself wanted them to leave, that it was longing for its rightful occupants to return.
It's like from the beginning, there's this feeling of impending doom, like something terrible is going to happen if they don't abandon their dream home.
Exactly. It's a real-life psychological thriller, and this constant fear and uncertainty started to really affect the Broaddus family. The kids were terrified to be alone in their rooms, to play outside, even to go to school.
Wow.
Maria was dealing with anxiety and couldn't sleep. Derek, the father, became withdrawn and irritable. The letters were slowly tearing their family apart.
So at this point, they had to have called the police, right? Someone had to try to stop this nightmare.
They did almost right away. But that's when things take another turn toward frustration and uncertainty. Despite the police doing their best, the investigation hit a wall.
Oh, a wall.
There were no fingerprints on the letters, no witnesses, and no obvious suspects.
So who did the police focus on initially? Was there anyone who seemed like a likely suspect?
Well, suspicion naturally fell on the neighbors, right? It's often said that the most dangerous people are the ones closest to us.
Right.
And in a case like this, where the letters showed such detailed knowledge of the house and the family's routines, it made sense to start with the people living nearby.
Yeah, it makes sense someone living close by would have the chance to watch the family, learn their habits, and get to their mailbox without raising suspicion.
Exactly. And one neighbor in particular seemed to fit the description, at least on the surface. A man named Michael Langford lived right next door to 657 Boulevard.
Oh, wow.
He had a history of strange behavior, including peering into people's windows,
Mhm.
and his family had lived in the area since the 1960s, which lined up with the Watcher's claims of multi-generational surveillance.
So he seems like a strong suspect on the surface. Did the police have any solid evidence connecting him to the letters?
Well, that's where things get tricky. While Langford's behavior raised red flags, the police couldn't find any definite proof linking him to the letters.
Really?
DNA testing on the envelopes didn't match anyone in the Langford family.
Hmm.
And even with extensive surveillance and interviews, they couldn't find any hard evidence connecting him to the case.
So the police were back at square one with a terrifying mystery and a growing list of possible suspects, but no clear answers. What did the Broaddus family do in the meantime? Were they able to stay in the house while the investigation went on?
No, they never even moved in. The fear was just too much, and you can't blame them. Imagine trying to sleep at night knowing someone's out there watching you, waiting for the right moment to strike.
It's a parent's worst nightmare. You'd be constantly on edge wondering if every creak, every shadow was the watcher coming for your family.
Absolutely. The letters had destroyed their sense of security. The Broadduses decided to rent a different place while they figured out what to do with the house on Boulevard.
Oh, wow.
They put it up for sale, hoping to find a buyer who is willing to take a chance on a property with such a disturbing past.
But I can't imagine that was easy to sell word over. Word of watcher letters must have spread like wildfire, making the house practically unsellable.
You're exactly right. Rumors and speculation about the house and the mysterious stalker spread throughout the community, and even further fueled by media coverage and online forums dedicated to figuring out the mystery.
Wow.
Potential buyers were understandably hesitant, spooked by the chilling stories and the lack of answers.
It's like the house itself became cursed, tainted by the presence of the watcher and the fear he instilled in the Broaddus family.
That's a great way to put it. The Watcher had successfully turned their dream home into a symbol of terror, a place where darkness lingered and secrets whispered.
Oh.
And even as the police continued their investigation, the letters kept coming, each one a fresh reminder that the nightmare was far from over. It's crazy to think those letters kept coming even after they moved out.
I know, it's like the watcher was obsessed, enjoying the fact that they couldn't escape.
Right, exactly, like he was reveling in their displacement, their inability to get away from him.
Yeah.
Did the new letters offer any more clues about who the Watcher was or why they were doing this?
I was going to ask that.
No, unfortunately not. They continued in the same creepy style, full of cryptic messages, vague threats, and unsettling references to what the family was doing. It seemed like the Watcher knew when the Broadduses were at the house, even when they were just stopping by to check on things, almost as if they had eyes everywhere, like a network of unseen spies feeding them information.
That's so creepy. Did their writing style ever change, or was there any hint that they were getting tired of this twisted game?
Not a bit. Actually, one of the most disturbing letters came after the Broaddus family managed to find renters who were brave enough to take on the situation. Yeah, it was addressed to the vile and spiteful Derek and his wench of a wife, Maria, and claimed that the house hated them, that their presence was like a violation of some sacred space.
So basically, their attempts to get back to some kind of normalcy, to move on with their lives, just made the watcher more obsessed, more determined to control the situation.
Exactly. It added this whole other level of torment to what they were already going through.
Right.
They not only lost their dream home, but now they were being personally attacked, accused of being the villains in this story they never wanted to be a part of.
Did the police ever think about the possibility that this was a more planned out thing, maybe someone with a grudge against the Broaddus family?
They did, but they couldn't find any evidence to back that up. The Broadduses seemed like a normal family, no obvious enemies or anyone who had gained from their misfortune.
It's just bizarre. This family buys their dream house, and bam, they're thrown into this real-life horror movie with no explanation, no clear motive, and no escape.
That's a good way to put it. The Watcher case really gets to those deep-seated fears we have. You know, the idea that something sinister could be lurking right there beneath the surface of our everyday lives.
Did the police consider that it might be a hoax? Like an elaborate prank that went too far?
They did, and that theory was appealing considering there was no physical evidence or clear motive. But if it was a prank, it was a cruel one and incredibly damaging. It was planned with such attention to detail and commitment. It's really disturbing.
Think about it. The handwritten letters, knowing all those personal details about the family timing the letters to coincide with important events in their lives. It would take a really messed up person to keep up that act for so long, knowing the emotional harm they were causing.
You're right, and even if it did start as a prank, it clearly became something much darker. The Watchers seemed to get pleasure from the family's fear and suffering, and that's not something a harmless prankster does.
Did the police ever have any other strong leads?
There were a couple, a local gamer who was supposedly really into dark stalker-themed video games came under suspicion, but again, the evidence was mostly circumstantial. There was also a theory that a previous owner of the house might be involved, someone with a strong attachment to the property who resented the new family moving in, but none of these leads really went anywhere.
So year after year, the letters kept coming, and the police kept investigating. But the Watcher remained a ghost haunting, 657 Boulevard.
What happened to the house?
In the end, did the Broadduses ever manage to sell it?
Selling that house was incredibly tough. The stigma attached to it was huge. Even after they lowered the asking price a lot, they still struggled to find a buyer. All the rumors and speculation had turned the house into an outcast, a symbol of fear and uncertainty.
It's a powerful reminder that a dream can become a nightmare so quickly, and how even in the most desirable places, a dark secret can poison the very essence of a home.
You're right. The Watcher case really highlights how fragile our sense of safety and security is. We often take for granted that our homes are our sanctuaries, places where we can escape the dangers of the outside world, but this case shows us that those boundaries can be broken, that even within our own homes, we're not always truly safe.
It also raises questions about the legal and ethical side of this kind of situation. I mean, if someone is sending threatening letters, even if they never physically hurt anyone, shouldn't there be some legal action that can be taken?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But the legal system often struggles with cases like this. The Walker was careful to never make any direct threats of violence, and the letters themselves, while disturbing, could be seen as protected free speech.
So even though the Broaddus family was going through this terrifying harassment campaign, the law couldn't really help them.
Unfortunately, that's often the case with stalking. It's really hard to prove intent and to show the emotional damage caused by that kind of behavior, especially when there's no physical violence involved.
Did the Broadduses ever get any resolution, any sense of closure to this whole nightmare?
Sadly, no years went by, and the case stayed unsolved. The Watcher's identity remained a mystery, and the family was left to deal with the psychological and financial fallout from this horrifying experience.
It's hard to imagine not having any closure after something like that. So what's the latest on the case? Is there any hope that the Watcher will ever be found out?
Yeah, it really is the not knowing, that constant feeling like you're being watched. It makes it so hard to move on.
So whatever happened to the house? Did they ever sell it?
They did, but it wasn't easy at all. The Broaddus family finally sold the house in 2019, 5 years after they bought it, but they had to take a huge financial hit, and they were never really able to escape the shadow of the Watcher.
It's a sad ending to what should have been a happy new beginning for them.
It really is. The Watcher case is a chilling reminder that even in the safest neighborhoods behind those perfect-looking houses, darkness can be hiding, and sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones we never actually see, the ones whose motives we can't understand.
This case is just so fascinating, isn't it? It's been years, and people are still captivated by this story of the Watcher. There have been documentaries, podcasts like ours, even a Netflix series inspired by it.
It's a story that really gets to people on a basic level. It taps into our fears of the unknown, those unseen forces that can mess up our lives and leave us feeling completely helpless. And the fact that it's still unsolved just makes it even more intriguing.
Do you think there's any chance they'll ever figure out who the Watcher is with all the advances in DNA technology and investigative techniques? Could there be a breakthrough someday?
It's definitely possible. Cold cases get solved all the time because of new technology and fresh perspectives. Maybe one day some new piece of evidence will surface that changes everything. A DNA match, a witness. They overlooked something that finally solves the mystery.
I think that's what keeps people so interested in these unsolved mysteries, that little glimmer of hope that maybe someday the truth will come out and justice will be served.
I agree. And until then, the Watcher case serves as this warning, a reminder that even in the most ordinary places, darkness can exist.
It also shows how important community is. Looking out for each other, reporting anything that seems suspicious. We all have a part to play in making sure our neighborhoods are safe for ourselves and our families.
Absolutely. And if there's anything positive we can take from this unsettling story, it's that we should never assume we're safe.
Well said. The Watcher case reminds us that the world can be a strange and scary place, but it also shows how resilient people can be despite all the trauma they went through. The Broaddus family found a way to move on, to rebuild their lives, and that's a message of hope in the midst of all the darkness.
It is. It reminds us that even when we're facing the unknown, we can choose to face our fears, find support, and find strength in each other.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive into the chilling case of the Watcher. It's a case that continues to fascinate and frighten, leaving us with more questions than answers.
Thanks for having me. It's been a captivating, if a little unsettling conversation.
And to our listeners, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the Watcher case? Do you have any theories? Share them with us on our website or social media pages. And be sure to follow and subscribe to CrimePod Castle and our YouTube channel for more deep dives into the world of true crime.
Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the most frightening mysteries are the ones that are closest to home.